Good morning. Today's video presentation is about activity scheduling in projects. In a project, what we actually do is we progress from one activity to the next. We plan the project in terms of different activities, or they are also sometimes called tasks. Let me consider, for instance, the life cycle of a project. I start when the project is initiated, then I progress to the planning stage or phase, then to the implementation phase, then to the closeout phase. What is important is that I do all of this in a planned manner. So there's constant progressive, in a planned manner, elaborated manner. For instance, initiation will consume resources and it will take time to complete. So every activity in a project has a name, a task name or a activity name, and a number. It has a scheduled start and finishing time based on the duration of the activity. There's effort involved. We use resources to perform the task required to finish the activity, so there's effort involved. It must comply with a specific quality standard, so there's standard requirements. The collective time, cost, quality of every and all of the project activities ultimately determine the project duration, cost, and quality, and that's a project scope. We start activity scheduling by preparing an activity chart. On the activity chart, I list the different activities that we will perform in the project. Try to do so in the sequence in which they will be performed. Then I give each one a number, an activity number. I indicate the duration. Obviously, the duration will depend on the resource that we load into each activity. The duration will determine the start and the finishing times of each activity. The start and finishing time of every activity depends on activity predecessors, which is an important concept in activity scheduling. What you see here will better explain the principle of a predecessor. The first activity on the project is approval. I get that number that I put in this, we call it a node, in this node. I get it from the activity chart. Activity 2 will start when activity 1 is finished. That's an important principle. The duration of activity 1 is 10 days. So activity 2 cannot start before I finish activity 1. So activity 2, research, can only start after the 10th of January because that is when activity 1 finished. So activity 2 can start the 11th of January. And then the duration thereof is 30 days. So it's 30 days since I've started with activity 2 before I will be in a position to start activity 3. And then it is 20 days required to perform activity 3. So this means I can only start activity 4 once I finish activity 3, and the duration of activity 3 is 20 days. So the predecessor for activity 2 is activity 1. Obviously, the first activity in a project doesn't have a predecessor. Nothing precedes it. It does, however, have a succeeding activity. The succeeding activity of activity 1 is activity 2. The predecessor for 3 is 2. The predecessor for 4 is 3. The scheduling of project activities must be logical. That's why we say that there's a logical relationship between project activities. There are two primary relationship types in projects, namely mandatory, then they are in series, and parallel, but we'll come to that. The predecessor of activity 2 in this example is activity 1. So 2 cannot start before I finish 1. And 3 cannot start before I finish 2. So the predecessor to 3 is 2. Here you can find the example. All these activities are in series, which means you must finish the one before you can start the next. Then they are, the relationship amongst them is series. There's also a parallel relationship between project activities, and this is very important for scheduling and for resource loading in projects. I must finish 3 before I can start either 4 or 5. But 4 and 5 can be done simultaneously. So the relationship between 4 and 3 is mandatory, it's in series, and also between 3 and 5, and also between 5 and 6, and also between 5 and 6. 4 and 6, sorry, and 5 and 6. But between 4 and 5, it's parallel. It's discretionary. Discretionary means you can start one of these activities later or end it sooner without extending the duration of the project. The duration of activity 3 are 3 minutes. So before you can start either 4 or 5, you must finish 3 because 3 is the predecessor. So 4 can start 4 minutes into the project and 5 can start 4 minutes into the project. 3 minutes plus 1. The same for 6. You must finish 4 before you can start 6, and you must finish 5 before you can start 6. But now the question is, when can you actually start 6? Because 4 and 5 can be done simultaneously. The duration of 4 is 5 minutes, and the duration of 5, 2 minutes. So to perform activities 3, 4, and 6 will take you 8 minutes. 3 plus 5. To perform activities 3, 5, and 6 will take you 5 minutes. 3 plus 2 is 5. This one, 3, 4, 6, is the longest path in the project. We call it the critical path. Critical because it determines the project duration. With activity 5, you can start it later or you can end it earlier, as long as it is done before that 5 minutes of the activity in which it is in parallel with namely activity 4 as lapsed. So if I have a project the predecessor of A200 is A100, the predecessor of 400 is 200, and the predecessor of A600 is A400. The predecessor of 300 is A100, of 500 is 300, and of 600 is 500. You must perform activity 100 before you can perform start 200 or 300. Then you must perform 200 before you can start 400, and you must perform 400 before you can start 600. Same this way. That's the mandatory, the in-series relationship in this project. But the parallel relationships is between A200 and A300, and between A400 and A500, which means these two can be done simultaneously, and these two can be done simultaneously. On our activity chart, we've indicated that activity 100 will take 5 days to complete. So it's 5 days here, 5 days into the project here and here on both of these paths. Then activity 200 will take 10 days. Activity 300 will take 8 days. Activity 400 will take 3 days. Activity 500 will take 4 days. And activity 600 will take 2 days to complete. So let's add it together. The path A100, 200, 400, 600 will take 5 days, plus 10 is 15, plus 3 is 18, plus 2 is 20 days to complete. Path 100, 300, 500, 600 will take 5 days, plus 8 is 13, plus 4 is 17, plus 2 is 19 days to complete. So that tells us that this path 100, 200, 400, 600 is the critical path on the project. We also identify the milestones, the key dates when we do activity scheduling in a project. Consider this example. We have a project. We want to compile a manual. First, we must get approval for the project. If we don't get approval for the project will not be able to be conducted. So the first milestone date is the 10th of January. 10th of January. Then we engage in different activities, like if we get that approval, to conduct the workshop, to do the research. The second milestone is the 16th of February, because it's then that we submit, check, and distribute the inputs. Without those inputs, again, we cannot continue with the project. Research results available. Then the modules, the different modules is compiled. Okay. The budgeting module, the accounting module, and supply chain management module can be done simultaneously if you have different people working on each of these modules. Otherwise, then, let me just say, if you have different experts, then they can be done in parallel, discretionary. But if you have the same person that must do all three, you will not be able to do this. Then they will be in series, the one after the other. But let's say they can be done like it is here, presented here in parallel. 5's duration is 25 days, 6's duration of 15 days, and 7's 35 days. The longest of these three, the one that will determine the critical path, is 7, 35 days. So that also will determine this milestone when the modules must be compiled, the 23rd of March. Then you compile the manual, which must be finished by the 6th of April, and the whole project must be finished by the 20th of April. And there are the milestones in the project with their different activities. This milestones here the cluster header for the activities. We call them HOMOCs.